Hello, everyone. I am Dan St. Germain, Community Manager on Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And today I have the awesome opportunity to sit down with some of the writers, editors, and organizers behind Assassin's Creed stories. Everything from novels and comics, webtoons and manga, graphic novels and webcomics, all this and more falls under the umbrella of Assassin's Creed stories. And today we're going to have a chat with some of the creators of these stories. Our first guest today is one of the masterminds behind Assassin's Creed stories, Etienne Bouvier. Etienne, tell us who you are and what it is you do, please.
Hey Dan, hey everyone. My position at Ubisoft is that of Transmedia Content Manager, which means that I oversee and coordinate the development of all of our publishing and transmedia projects, whether they are novels, graphic novels, mangas, comics, audio series as well, between our external partners, publishers, writers, illustrators also, and our internal creative partners here at Ubisoft, basically the creative teams within the studios, especially the narrative teams, to ensure lore consistency.
Interesting. That's a pretty wide net of everything that you cover. When it comes to Assassin's Creed transmedia stories, where can they be found exactly?
We now have one single destination for our fans to find the information about each and every transmedia project that we launched on the Assassin's Creed brand. It's called Assassin's Creed Stories. It's a website on which you can find all you need to know about our novels, our illustrated projects, our digital projects, art books, etc. It's finally the one and only destination on which all the information will be available for fans to better navigate between all the transmedia projects that we launch. And there's a lot. We have inserted on this page also all the old transmedia projects, those that were launched in the previous 10 years, so that you can have a complete history of what was made in terms of transmedia on the Assassin's Creed franchise.
And so what sort of stories or settings do these various works cover? You know, we've got now 10 years of different stories. What's the breadth of all these?
Well, Dan, we cover very different genres with this transmedia program. We have traditional fiction formats, which our fans are very familiar with. Obviously, these are the novels, the graphic novels here in France, the comics in the US, but also the mangas in Japan. It's an important part of our transmedia development, of course, and we will go on developing these kind of projects. But more and more today, we also have digital formats. We have been lucky enough last year, for example, to launch our first Audible original audio series, which was called Assassin's Creed Gold, starring Riz Ahmed. It was a blast to develop, and I know that our fans did love the story of this blind assassin. We have many different other digital projects in the making at the moment. We have webtoons, you have seen that. We also have webcomics. That's an interesting opportunity for me to tell you a bit more about Assassin's Creed Dynasty. Assassin's Creed Dynasty was at first a Chinese webcomic developed only to be launched on digital platforms in China. We associated with Chu Tianjie, the author of Blade of the Guardians, which was read more than 1 billion times in China, to develop this epic story set during the Tang Dynasty, where a brand new assassin, Li He, is trying to basically save this dynasty from civil war. The project was at first digital only, Chinese language only, but it was so successful and we saw so much potential for this project that we found traditional publishing partners across the world to launch the webcomic localized in different languages in traditional paperback format. So digital for us is really an opportunity now because it allows us to go from digital to traditional publishing and to reach our communities of fans all across the world.
Some of the authors for Assassin's Creed stories are pretty big names. Are we still able to incorporate more regional voices into the narratives?
Well, of course, there is room for local talents, and we try to integrate as much of them as we can within this transmedia program. I can give you 3 examples of projects that are initiated with local talents. First, we will launch our first original webtoon in South Korea along with Red Ice, a South Korean company specializing in that specific genre. They are currently hard at work developing along with Korean writers, Korean artists, this sequel to Assassin's Creed Black Flag, which will expand Edward Kenway's storyline, exploring his further adventures in the Pacific area. Then we have our Chinese collection of novels called the Imperial Jade Seal Collection. Through this collection of 10 novels, we will explore several major Chinese dynasties thanks to the work of 5 Chinese writers who specialize in historical novels. Finally, I can also mention the manga that we developed in Japan along with Shogakukan. It's called Blade of Shaojun, and it was designed by Minoji Kurata, a Japanese mangaka who also specializes in historical fiction and had a voice of her own to retell the story of Shaojun and to link it with a modern day storyline involving a Japanese hero. So if you want to know more about this specific manga, we have a short documentary about its artist that we will display just now so that you can get to know her a bit better.
もともと4年前ぐらいからそのゲームをやるようになって、で特に朝栗は好きだったので、ちょっと担当さんとかにもいろいろ話をしていて、でそれがあったからこう朝栗のコミカライズ作家を探してるっていう時に名前を挙げていただいたんだと思ってます。 もう最初はあまりいや私ではちょっとみたいなふうに思ってネームだけならとかそういうふうな話はしてたんですけど、でもせっかくだったら自分で書きたいと思ってそれで、全部ネームから作画まで担当させてもらうことになりますし。自分がファンだからこそファンの人にも楽しんでもらいたいし、でもファンじゃない方にも読んでそこから入ってもらいたいっていうのもあったんで、だからちゃんとゲームの背景とかなんか設定とかをきちんと説明するのはちゃんと入れようと思って、であとゲームの方クロニクルチャイナだけだとそのシャオユンの話だけなんですけど、本来多分未来の誰かが先祖の記憶を追体験してるっていうのがベースにあるので、現代編はちゃんと入れたいなと思って、そこは入れられるように考えました。そちらの方でそのクロニクルチャイナにはない要素とか、あとその現代の教団と騎士団の戦いについてとか、そういうのは現代編の方で入れようとしています。朝栗はその戦うことよりもやっぱり隠れて動いたりとか、そういうところの方が要素としては大きいんですけど、でもそればっかりになるとちょっと漫画としては難しいなって思ったので、ちょっとあえて戦うシーンを多めに入れたりとか、そういうところで視覚的に面白い要素をなるべく多く入れようとはしています。まずは読みやすいっていうところを一番気にはしてるんですけど、やっぱりテンポが悪かったりとか、なんかセリフが入りづらかったりっていうと、多分そこでもう読むのをやめてしまう人も多い媒体だと思うんですよね、漫画って。なんか流し読みもできるけど、流し読んで記憶に残るかどうかってやっぱその話がきちんと入ってくるかによると思うので、そこが一番漫画家としては気にして書いてるところです。自分の好きな世界とかそういうのを誰かに分かってもらいたいみたいな感じで書いているので、なんかそれでその世界観だとかその設定だとかを好きになってくれる人が増えたら嬉しいし、なんか私もそういうなんか何かのきっかけになれたらいいなと思いながら書いてます。
And so I see some of the content on the Assassin's Creed Stories website has these labels like Chronicles, Classics, Originals. Can you explain what those mean?
Yes, of course. Well, as you know, we have more and more fiction developed within the Assassin's Creed universe, more and more stories that are intertwined, and we can understand that at some point for our fans it's not that easy to understand when they pick up a book, when they pick up a manga, what kind of story they will read in this book. So we designed these 3 labels in order for them to be able to better navigate our collections. The first of these labels is called Classics. Classics are direct adaptation of the storylines of the games. We took the script of the game and we turned it into a novel, a manga, a graphic novel. That's an amazing opportunity for fans to live once again the story of this game that they loved, but through the very specific lens of a writer, an illustrator who gives his or her take on this story. Then we have the Chronicles. We know that some of our characters were fan favorites, and we know that many fans want to learn more about their favorite characters. So Chronicles are often prequels, sequels, excellent opportunities to expand the life of one of our heroes, to give more information about him or her, more background. So these are what Chronicles stories are for. And finally, we have the originals. Originals are very important when it comes to Assassin's Creed transmedia developments, because Assassin's Creed tells us basically the history of humanity, and there are many settings, many eras that are so interesting to explore through books, through mangas, through comics. We take this opportunity within the transmedia program and we create these original stories with brand new heroes that we know that our fans will love. So thanks to these three labels, Classics, Chronicles, Originals, we are now certain that our fans will know exactly what kind of story to expect when they delve into a new transmedia project.
Thank you, thank you, Etienne, for taking the time to explain kind of the broad strokes of Assassin's Creed stories.
Thank you, Dan. It was a pleasure.
Next up, we've got Amar Azazia, one of the directors on the various AC Stories transmedia content. Amar, what exactly does that fancy title entail?
Hey Dan, yeah, I know it's kind of a weird title and I've got like the hugest business card of the whole industry, but the thing I'm usually working on are everything that is beyond the realm of pure gaming, which means in the case of Assassin's Creed, we're talking about the movie, the TV series with Netflix, animation show, like every single pieces of narrative content that is getting outside of the realm of just the game. And also, side to that, it's all the cool goodies and toys that you can see like here that I'm working on that fans really love.
Mm-hmm. So a common question that whenever new media gets involved, whenever new Assassin's Creed stories or TV shows get involved in the overall continuity, the main question that a lot of players will end up having is where do these new pieces of content fit into the overall continuity of Assassin's Creed?
Yeah, by continuity, usually the question we've got is about the pieces of content being canonical or not. Like that's kind of the huge question. Like, is it part of something that will have an impact on the games or the narrative overall, or is it something that is self-contained? And it's definitely a case-by-case scenario, depending on like the partnership, the media, what we're doing. I would say that roughly the mass majority of the content that we've been working on is a part of the Assassin's Creed mythos. Like it's all part of the same universe. So whether it's going to act as a prequel to a game or something else that's just going to add like more content to the overall Assassin's Creed mythos and story. But how do we take this decision is depending on the partner and how evolved they are, I would say, development schedule. Like sometimes, schedules kind of overlap and it's quite hard to take a lot of things into account where we're still developing a game and we need to add more stuff. So we got an expertise and usually we're really cautious. So if it's something leading up to a game, we take our time, we work with the team. We have like the different people working on the franchise all together in order to take this decision. And the other way we do it is we basically develop something that is not touching the direct narrative of the upcoming game. Like in the case of Valhalla, we can have a story that is going to be told in China and it won't have any direct impact on the franchise. So that's a way that we can all keep our sanity while working on things that make sense and are part of content.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? If the next game is looking like it's taking place in Norway and England, then going to the opposite side of the globe is a good way to make sure that you're not risking anything with regards to kind of overlapping stories. And then, so when it comes to kind of You had mentioned that you're working with a lot of internal and external partners. What is the process exactly for, balancing out working with those different partners while constantly broadening the Assassin's Creed world? Because you're not just talking to only people who are working on all the same things. Talking to people who are working on a novel that's taking place in China, a game that's taking place in Norway, and all these different partners.
So when it's not connected directly to a game, usually what we're doing is we have our brand team and the transmedia team that is responsible for overseeing all the development of this different products and projects that we have. So we know the franchise, we know what we want to do, we know what we want to achieve, and we are the one taking the decision and coordinating all of this effort. When it's closer to a game or it's directly connected to a game like the Dark Horse comics that we have, or the novel from Matt Kirby that has been released that is tapping directly into AC Valhalla, then what we're doing is, and it was the world before the pandemic, so bear with me. Usually what we were doing was we were flying out the different author. In the case of Matt Kirby, like Matt came to the studio. Same went for Dark Horses as our partners. Like we had the writers coming to the studio and we spent a couple of days with them. So when I say we, I mean the transmedia team, but also dev team. So for Assassin's Creed Valhalla, it was the creative director, narrative director, and we're overseeing the whole development of what the story is going to be. So what we're trying to do is to define a sandbox in which the author can have fun. We don't want to be on their shoulder and basically checking every single step they're gonna do. What we want to do is getting sure that those guys can express their art, come up with an original story. But if it's connected to a world, we need to get sure that everything's work at least as well or as elegantly, I would say, as possible. So for the case of Dark Horse, we decided that having a prequel to the game would be very interesting into digging into some other character or showcasing things that we don't have in the game. And the format itself was really interesting for that. So of course, narrative director was involved, creative director was involved, because we don't want to take them off guard, say something that would break continuity. So it's very important to have that collaboration. And we try to do it as early on as possible. That way, Prod can then focus on shipping a good game and we can focus on delivering a kick-ass story.
Awesome. And then one question I've always just been personally curious about, we have some novels that are based off of the content and the events that happen in the games, right? Has there been any kind of, talk about making or having some of the games be directly based off of novels that have already been written in the AC Stories universe?
It's a very good question. It's something that fans are usually asking themselves. They're like, I really love that story and I would love to see it in a game. The question has been brought quite a couple of times. In fact, it's very different to work on a game or TV series because the constraint itself is completely different. Like on a comic books, we can have fun by having our character travel to the world. They can be in Constantinople and then in Norway, but building that in a game is huge. So it's not. Or on the set for a TV series, we have exactly the same problem. We're like, oh yeah, we want to, explore different time periods. It's like, yeah, we're gonna have to pay for that. So it's a bit more complicated, but it's definitely interesting to see that they fell in love with those characters that we've created, and we've seen, in fact, a lot of them having, I would say, a more complex career than what was expected at first. Like Otto Berg was first created as a character in the multiplayer of Assassin's Creed, but you didn't see the face of Otto, you just hear his voice. And then through Transmedia, with Initiate Comics, we basically defined him by giving him a face, an attitude, a story, and then he came back in the game with the design we created. So it was kind of a super positive emulation. And some characters like Daniel Cross were created in the graphic novel and then play quite a significant role in the game themselves. So that kind of things happen, I would say, quite a lot. Probably not as often as some fans would love to, but we've already created and crafted so many stories. Like just adapting all of them in games would mean we would have a lot of work upfront, but that could happen.
Yeah, of course. And that's I never knew about that. It's super cool to hear about kind of how they they make their way into the games if you kind of read between the lines rather than just having full installments based around them and their stories. And that wraps up our preliminary discussion. Now we get the chance to dive in and talk a little bit more shop with some of the editors and authors themselves. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce our panel for today. Robin Jolly, editor of the French graphic novel over at Glénat. Freddie Miller, editor of the Song of Glory graphic novel. Gwen Nix, editor of the Ming Storm novel, as well as the editor of a brand new Valhalla novel. Elsa Hunison, the writer of that new Valhalla novel, as well as numerous short fiction works and several books. And Olivier Gay, a writer of one of the new AC Fragments young adult novels. Robin, Freddie, you're both editors on these different novels. Could you just very quick give yourselves an introduction for everyone else who's just now seeing you for the first time?
Hi, I'm Freddie Miller. I'm an editor at Dark Horse Comics. We have been, we're a US publisher. We've been publishing comics since 1986. Some titles you might be familiar with from Dark Horse are Sin City, Hellboy, The Mask, in recent times, The Umbrella Academy, Resident Alien. I work on a lot of our licensed titles here. So I work on our full line of Ubisoft comics, including Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, The Division, along with some other things.
My name is Robin Jolly, and first of all, I apologize for my very, very French accent. I'm editor at Glénat, which is one of the main publisher of comic books in France. We do like mangas like One Piece, Dragon Ball, to comics for youth like Titeuf, and obviously comic books about Ubisoft universe, which we are talking here.
So you know, some titles that maybe some people have heard of. Could you both explain, for a layman like myself, what exactly it is an editor does for a story like this, and what's like the impact of your work that someone could easily see?
I guess you could sum up our work as the one of producer for music or movies. Regarding our Assassin's Creed Valhalla graphic novel at Glénat, the first job was to find a great team of authors to make a book about Assassin's Creed. Then we give them creative support to improve their story, their art. We make the connection between artists and the team of Ubisoft with the big help of Etienne, and our marketing, sales, communication department. Then we finalize the stuff, we correct if there is any mistake, and we check with the printer to get a beautiful book.
I would agree with all of that. I kind of tend to refer to my job as that of a project manager. You know, keeping things on time, putting together the team, keeping to a schedule, making sure everything hits the shelves on time as we guide the entire creative team through the process. We work with design for the cover and the interiors, and all that.
Wow, it sounds like both of you are wearing a lot of different hats on a day-to-day basis. Since you're working with something directly connected to an existing game, how do you incorporate different visual elements from a video game into such a different medium, such as graphic novels?
That's where the collaboration with Etienne and the Ubisoft team becomes very important. As you said, Assassin's Creed Valhalla has an existing universe and a huge one. So the authors and us need to focus on how they can tell the story they want and respect this universe, its visual identity as well as its key elements. And for this, every aspect, from the development of the script to the tiles shape of a church roof in the book, is constantly examined by the teams of Ubisoft. That's a lot of things we keep in mind, including the most important one, which is making a great book.
Yeah, I would say we have to dive completely into the world that's been developed. It's a huge, rich world that's already being developed or has been developed for the game. And so we need to completely go into that. And we also receive a lot of references. So myself and our teams need to refer to that and pay close attention to everything that's been developed so we can stay true to the world.
And how did the particular artistic vision and artistic team for these respective works come to be?
At Glenna, with the graphic novel of Glenna, we needed to find a team, of course, of players and fans of Assassin's Creed, but with the qualities that fit with the spirit of the game. That's why we asked Mathieu Gabella, who is our writer, and who likes to do stories with very great historical backgrounds. I mean, he could speak with you about history during hours. And the artist, Paolo Tresci, did with us an adaptation of Jack Vance's Demon Princes, which is a sci-fi saga with a lot of epicness, and this is the epicness we want to make Assassin's Creed book. So together they will take us to the beautiful landscape of Scotland in an adventure that involves assassins, Vikings, monks, sacred books, and mysterious legends, which sounds like kind of Assassin's Creed's DNA.
Our writer, Kevin Scott, and our artist, Martin Tunica, were recommended by Dark Horse, and the Ubisoft team took a look at their previous work, their resume, and decided that they would be great choices for Assassin's Creed. In Kevin's case in particular, he is a big fan of Viking stories, and the Viking Age is a favorite historical period of his, so that worked out incredibly well. And then for Martin Tunica, he was able to translate the Assassin's Creed Valhalla universe into his own particular style very well, showing violence, realism, action, and paying really close attention to all that reference.
Absolutely. And so where do you as editors, or as you said, project managers, kind of fall into the dynamic between writers and illustrators as the story is being constructed from the ground up?
Well, of course, we are not the authors. It remains their story, but we are the first readers. We can give them feedback if some things don't work or seem not clear enough for us and possibly to the readers. But we can also suggest things. For example, I remember that I really wanted to see the islands drawn by Paolo, so the background of Scotland was kind of choice of mine. But mostly we are here to help them if they have any question, doubts, or concerns regarding the respect of the game and the relevance of their story.
We help guide our team through the development, and we remain like a contact between them and the folks at Ubisoft if they don't happen to have direct contact all the time, pulling reference for them, or being a first set of eyes on their work to give feedback.
So video games and graphic novels, obviously two very different experiences, right? What are some of the advantages or disadvantages in your experience of using a more 2D medium? Do games and graphic novels play off of each other in ways that the average reader might not expect?
Well, obviously, as you say, it's two different mediums, so we can't play with the same objectives. The main issue is the time. Video games like Assassin's Creed give dozens, even hundreds of hours of experience to their players, and we only have 80 pages, so we need to focus on what makes the strength of comics narrative, which is graphics and ellipse. As Scott McCloud said, comics is the art of the invisible, and is still, in my opinion, one of the best medium to tell a story and stimulate readers' imagination, as well as to give them time images that will stop them and blow their minds. So for this, as you will see right after, I can say that Paolo seemed to be a pretty good choice.
I think that comics give fans a opportunity to take as much time as they want with moments with characters. You know, if you have an action scene in the game, it's going very quickly, but in a comic, you can stop and really see all the details. And one of our goals in the comics is to add to the richness of the game and the characters. And so I think that's something that fans will find.
Well, thank you both so much for your time and insight into the editorial headspace. We'll have a quick time-lapse drawing by Paolo before we jump right into our next session. I'm now joined by Gwen Nix and Elsa Hunison, the editor and writer, respectively, of a brand new Valhalla novel. Could you each quickly say a word to introduce yourselves?
I'm Elsa Honason. I'm a science fiction and fantasy and nonfiction writer. I've had short fiction published in Uncanny Magazine, Fireside Magazine, and the upcoming Mermaids Monthly. And I have a memoir coming out in fall of 2021 about disability in media. It's called Being Seen: One Deafblind Woman's Fight to End Ableism. I've been working in media tie-in for the last 5 years, including Jessica Jones playing with fire from Cereal Box, and I've had a Peggy Carter comic come out in the Women of Marvel anthology. So that's kind of what I do. I do many different things, I wear many different hats, and I jump from genre to genre a little bit like an assassin.
And I'm Gwen Nix. I am an editor with Aconite Books. Aconite Books is the fictional imprint for the games group Asmodee, and our whole goal is to create world-expanding fiction. We write tie-in fiction for the Marvel Universe, a lot of Ubisoft properties, Legend of the Five Rings, Arkham Horror, you name it, we do it.
I have to ask, how do you first dive into creating a novel for a game that was, at least when you first started writing, still in production?
So for on the editorial side and like the production side, to create a novel idea while a game is in production takes just a ton of communication and collaboration. Essentially, we have to think of these worlds mentally as if they're real. We have to understand, the person, places, and things that will affect the events of the game, how those things are going to look at the end of the game, kind of see into the future with our glass eyes and our future crystal balls to see what might potentially be a good game in the future. And then really just look for those unresolved and uncovered niches that are really strong with storytelling and that we can feed into the greater narrative.
I mean, it's funny, I'm still finishing playing Valhalla right now. So it's been sort of like, oh, look, I now need to dive into this world very, very quickly and not slow down my playthrough at all. For me, like learning the game. Sort of learning what the game is doing while I'm also thinking about how to outline and sort of expand that world at the same time, which is fun and also kind of lets me play and work at the same time.
Being a Valhalla novel, it obviously is including some familiar faces, as well as some new names. Or I guess better yet, who can Valhalla fans expect to see more of in the new novel that they have already perhaps met?
Well, I can't tell you too much because if I do, I'm going to need to call up the current Assassin's Bureau and send them your way. But I can tell you that Valka will be making an appearance, as will Hytham, which I'm very excited about getting to write both of them into the novel. And you'll also get to meet some new, really exciting people. I'm really excited about our lead character. She's awesome.
Yeah, and thematically, we're really looking at how the Vikings influenced a lot of popular lores and legends that are beloved in that area at the time. So we're also, as Elsa had already said, we're bringing in popular in-game characters. We're also going to have some in-game characters that are cameoed. And then, as she had mentioned, some new familiar faces that we hope that fans will love.
Also, you had mentioned that Hytham is going to be in the novel, and so what is it like playing through the game, seeing the character that you're also writing for at the same time, and like what does that feel like to know that you are in some way shaping this character in the novel versus how you are already seeing them in the game?
It's funny, this is not my first time doing a tie-in project, and so every time I get to sort of touch a character who's already been established, it's like I get to play in somebody else's sandbox. I get to add to the story. So it feels very collaborative, to be honest with you. It's like I get to see what people did in the video game, and then I get to add to it and expand. And that's really exciting for me, both as a fan of the Assassin's Creed games for a long time, and also as an author who really enjoys getting to explore these sandboxes.
Yeah, and for me, it's just like I love seeing what Elsa creates in this world. Like she has so many unique new ideas that I'm just like, oh my goodness, everyone's gonna love that, or I love that. I can't wait to read this book. So not only am I excited as an editor, I'm also excited as a Assassin's Creed fan as well. So it's very exciting for me.
And how is the writing going now? When can readers expect to pick up the new novel?
Well, I'm writing, and it's going well. It's been good to get back to fencing lessons because I need to revisit my sword skills. After all, I am writing people whacking people with swords.
Yes, of course.
So I am in the fencing studio. But I also can't give you a totally clear date. I will say that it will show up somewhere in your hands in 2022. And by then I will have been fencing for a year and I can show off some of my skills while I'm holding a book in my hand.
And speaking of novels, Gwen, I've been told that you have an entire program pretty much dedicated to AC novels. Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yes, Aconite Books has a very robust Assassin's Creed program in the lineup. We were the publishers and the US publishers for the Garabin Saga novel, which just recently came out. We are also going to be doing a loose linked trilogy in the Valhalla universe, so you'll definitely be seeing more books coming from us in the future. And then we're also continuing the Ming Storm trilogy, which is going to be an original sixth strand in the Assassin's Creed universe. As for other stuff, the Assassin's Creed universe is so vast, you're definitely going to be having a lot of new books coming to you and to join the other books on your shelves.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both very much for taking the time to talk with me. I did not know anywhere near as much about the novel writing process or Assassin's Creed, or for Assassin's Creed, or pretty much otherwise at all before today. This has been extremely eye-opening, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lastly, but certainly not leastly, we have Olivier Gay, the writer of the first young adult novel within the series AC Fragments. Olivier, could you please introduce yourself?
So, thank you, Dan. My name's Olivier Gay. I'm a French novelist and comics writer. I've been writing heroic fantasy and crime books for adults, urban fantasy books for young adults. I also sell myself to a lot of studios, adapting television series like The Loud House, Jurassic World, comics like Asterix. And I also play a lot of video games, both off and online. And of course, Assassin's Creed is among my favorites, because when I can backstab someone, that's when I'm the most happy. So when Ubisoft called me and told me I could go wild on the universe, I kind of, felt all warm and fuzzy inside. And besides, when they told me I could write about Japan, I was so excited because I just learned 20 minutes ago when you spoke with the editor in Montreal that they are doing Legend of the Five Rings, and it's role-playing games that is set in Japan, in Rokugan. And I mean, I play a lot of it with my friends. I have lots of books, so in some way I'm already paying Ubisoft. I'm paying them back. But yeah, I was very, very excited when they called me. What exactly is Assassin's Creed Fragments? Well, actually, it's a trilogy written by 3 different writers at Edition 404. So it's 404, like the famous computer era. So it's 3 different writers, 3 different settings. And what's connecting them is all those books have siblings. And also, all those books are great. The first one, is mine, and so it's set in medieval Japan in 1868, at the time where the Edo era will end and the Meiji era will start. The second book is set in the Highlands, where, if you've seen the movie Braveheart, you'll know what I'll be talking about, what I'm talking about. And the last one is set in South France during the Inquisition, where a lot of witches were burnt. What makes this series of books different from a more classic novelization? Well, I kind of felt my life was on the line. I mean, this is Assassin's Creed we're talking about. I'm a big fan, so I don't want to mess up. But that's not the most important. The most important thing is the fans don't want me to mess up. There's a huge fan base everywhere in the world, and they all eagerly waiting to see whether I mess up or not, whether I get my facts right or not. And I mean, when I do an ego search and I write the name of the book, I find, websites in all kinds of languages, some in Japanese, some in Portuguese, and they are all, comparing facts and saying, oh, I hope it will be good. And I say, yeah, I hope it will be good as well. And also, there's also a lot of pressure because I chose medieval Japan as a setting, and it's a very, very popular setting. I mean, a lot of people are reading, comic books, mangas. I've seen movies about medieval Japan, and they aren't as forgiving as they would be for other time periods. When you want to do it, you have to do it right. I hope I did it right.
Awesome. And what was some of your inspiration behind picking medieval Japan as a setting, both the time period and the place?
Well, I'm a big fan of the romanticized view of medieval Japan. I mean, when I say romanticized, it's like, all the stuff you see in novels, you see in video games, you see in comic books or movies, like The Last Samurai, or when I was younger, I was a big fan of Rurouni Kenshin. I don't know how you say it in English, but ninjas vanishing into thin air, Shugenja casting spells, samurai battling with the light of dawn and stuff like this. I mean, it's the stuff of legends, and it's very, very interesting to recreate it for me. And it was even more interesting to recreate it with all this, game-ish and fantasy-ish stuff, but in a real time period with real people, real characters who existed, and the never-ending war between Templars and Assassins taking place at the beginning of the Meiji era.
So the Assassin's Creed games are about a lot of things, themes of family, legacy, freedom, as well as many other things, of course. And so how do the novels and how do your novels explore similar themes as the games, or perhaps branch off into new territory?
Yeah, well, it wasn't that hard actually, because all the themes you called are themes that are very common to humankind. I mean, every legend we talked about, even before books, when people talked about legends around campfires, it was about tales of family, tales of heroism, tales of freedom, and it's surprisingly vivid in whole humankind history. And so when I wrote this novel, it was even, I mean, the hard part wasn't this, it was, putting it in perspective so it could be as good as other things that have been done on Assassin's Creed.
Mm-hmm. So while you've been writing, what have been some of the difficulties and surprises or even sacrifices of turning a historically adult franchise into something more geared towards a young adult audience?
Well, surprisingly little. I mean, we reviewed the plot, of course, with the team at Ubisoft, but they were pleased with it. So thank you, Ubisoft. And they let me totally free to write what I wanted. Also for me, and I've written a lot of books, young adult books, and young adults aren't children. When I write for them, I don't censor myself. There's some graphic violence in the book. I mean, it's about samurais fighting, so there are, of course, some beheading involved. And at what times the heroine is pretty embarrassed at having other soldiers pissing in front of her. So, I mean, there are a lot of themes that can be seen as adults, but young adults can totally read it. And not everything is peachy. Some characters may not survive the ride, and that's what's interesting about.
Okay, yeah, that sounds extremely exciting, actually. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Because of soldiers pissing, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Yeah, that's the one. That's what was the deal breaker for me. Thank you so much for indulging the young adult and Assassin's Creed nerds within me, Olivier. It's been great talking with you.
Yeah, likewise.
And one last thank you to all of our guests.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye,
Bye.
Dan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all so much for tuning in. That's all for the show today, but definitely be sure to check out some of the work shown and covered here if you haven't already. Thanks again for watching, and have a great rest of your day.